In only the last few weeks, we have witnessed hurricanes and floods and fires devastating states across the nation. Our newsreels are flooded with stories of refugees fleeing Afghanistan in the wake of U.S. departure, and our country continues to mourn the loss of United States service members who died while working to get people out of the country. We are also witnessing state legislation successfully violating our constitutional right to abortion, while the stacked Supreme Court allows it to happen. Lawmakers are literally pitting citizen against citizen, encouraging us to spy on our neighbors and turn them in for profit, further deteriorating any semblance of communal support. Meanwhile, COVID continues to ravage our country as a small minority rejects the fact of our interdependence, stressing our healthcare systems to a near breaking point. Times are frightening, and frankly, as long as the fractures in our society continue to persist, pretty bleak. I've come across a term, hypernormalization, in recent weeks while trying, like so many of us, to make sense of the concurrent disasters we are all continuing to endure. The term comes from a Russian historian, Alexei Yurchak, writing about the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1970s and 80s. Yurchak states that everyone in the Soviet Union knew the system was failing, but no one could imagine an alternative to the status quo, and politicians and citizens alike were resigned to maintaining the pretense of a functioning society. Over time, the collective insistence that everything was as it should be became a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the illusion that society was functioning as normal became accepted as true. All well, society collapsed in around itself. The concept re-entered into the common lexicon again in 2016 when a documentary of the same name turned its focus to the United States. And now the term is making the rounds on social media as regular citizens try to make sense of the madness around them, while the powers that be insist that everything is normal. If we just keep going about our lives, going to our jobs, shopping and consuming, complicit in a system we see, at least on an individual level, no real alternative to. Hypernormalization is effective because we are all so much a part of the system, we are unable to see beyond it. The world continues to drive us apart, recognizing that what is most dangerous to a fragile and unequal system is the collective itself. As long as we continue to reject the undeniable fact of our interdependence, systems that tell us we are individuals with no responsibility to one another will continue to keep us from our collective liberation. Today is our ingathering service for the 2021-2022 church year. It is also our second kickoff year in virtual fellowship. I remember during the ingathering service last year how unbelievable the circumstances felt. I certainly did not imagine then that we would still be physically separate from one another, for the most part, and I can still scarcely believe it now. We were also hopeful in the spring that we could put COVID behind us and resume some semblance of our normal lives. I will never forget the visceral relief I felt when I got my first shot back in March of 2021. I was so hopeful. We all were. And yet, here we are. While we have certainly acclimated, things are decidedly not normal, no matter how hard the world tries to convince us they are. So here we are again, kicking off the church year from our screens, wondering when we'll ever be together again. As we gather in for the coming year, I sense a congregation yearning to reconnect and rebuild, I sense the need for comfort and reassurance. I sense that we are all seeking the rays of hope we need to continue through this unknown and unpredictable wilderness. Now is the time to reach out to one another, clasp hands, and continue forward into the unknown together. In my chaplaincy training, we were often cautioned against providing false hope. Never, we were told, tell someone in the midst of a crisis that things were going to be okay. Don't tell folks that because you, the lowly hospital chaplain, could not possibly know that things, in fact, were going to be okay. So for years, I removed "everything is going to be okay" from my vocabulary. I withheld even my most well-meaning platitudes, never wanting to be responsible for causing further harm when I was trying to provide comfort. But here's where part of the catch is. Chaplains rarely have much information beyond the initial incident. We don't enter into hospital rooms with a sense of a person's support systems or coping skills or resources or prognosis. We need to assess those things before we can sense if, in fact, it is possible that everything is eventually going to be okay. Luckily, parish ministers have a bit more information about those we pastor to. I feel a lot more confident reassuring this congregation that we can get through all of this. Everything is going to be okay, as long as we're together. In August, the board convened with the purpose of determining our theme for our church year and our collective goals. I must admit it wasn't the easiest brainstorming process. The goals were clearer. First, we would continue to remain as connected as possible to one another, whether virtually or when the opportunities arose, safely together in person. The board reminds us that we are currently able to gather in groups of 15 or less in our shared building. We encourage committees and groups to continue to make use of virtual meeting spaces, but to come together in person, adhering to our COVID guidelines when the opportunity arises. Second, we will continue to work on the relationship of the congregation to our congregation's young folks. We remain without a hired CCRE, but we are trying to find new ways to gather our youth together. Next week, we'll introduce a youth room available for kids at the CVUU to gather together socially in a virtual space during our regular fellowship time. We hope to find opportunities to gather together in person when it is safe to do so. Please continue to spread the word that we are hiring a benefited CCRE. Third, we would look for opportunities to grow our presence in the greater community. A few weeks ago, we were able to return to Pride. It was such a joy to be together in person at such an event. The need for a welcoming spiritual community was made clear to me through the enthusiasm with which folks responded when I introduced our progressive, inclusive congregation to them. We hope to focus on the ways we can continue to grow even as we face challenges ahead. But the theme was where we started to get stuck. We all sat together, each of us in our little Zoom square, quietly contemplating. What kind of theme could encompass all that we were facing in the year ahead? The world has become, by its very nature, unpredictable and uncertain. We continue to live in unprecedented times. It is exhausting to be continually living through history. So much feels completely out of our control. Gradually, we started to express to one another that what we felt we all needed most, comfort and above all else, reassurance that somehow, some way, we could all come out of this. Somehow, some way, we could all come out of this all right. How about, and I laughed when I suggested it, everything is going to be okay. It was funny, sure, but we also knew it to be true. As long as we're together, someone chimed in. And that was the heart of it. Times are indeed unprecedented and uncertain. No one in our congregation is encouraging any of us towards normalizing any of this. We don't know what things in our world and in our church will look like a year from now. But we do know one thing. As long as we focus on our collective goals, as long as we turn towards one another, resisting the urge to fracture and isolate under stress, we will make it through. Everything is going to be okay as long as we're together. This is not an unrealistic promise. We aren't saying that everything is going to be awesome or perfect. We can't predict that. Maybe it will be. We can certainly hope for the best, recognizing that, well, there may be so much that is out of our control. Together, we will make it through. So, everything is going to be okay as long as we're together, is our 2021-2022 church year theme. I read a fair amount of post-apocalyptic literature. If I'm reaching for a novel, I'm likely to pick up something about a solitary figure, usually a strong-willed woman, encountering the world in the wake of some kind of apocalyptic disaster. The books I tend to read follow a recognizable pattern. The world, and with it its various catastrophes, is introduced, and the protagonist initially faces it all alone, until finally, often under unusual or dangerous circumstances, they encounter a friend or a group of friends who form a covenant of shared survival. They never trust each other immediately. That always takes a little bit of time. But when the companions show up, things get better. Humanity seeps back into the cracks formed under the stress of sheer persistence. Laughter comes back. Shared ideas and group problem-solving emergence. There is music again, and conversation, and a sense that the world, dangerous and desolate as it may truly be, still contains its opportunities for joy. Most of the books I read create some sort of beloved community. Beloved community persists despite challenges. Beloved community is where the joy is amidst the uncertainty of the outside world. It is the place we come when we are seeking help or comfort or companionship. We, the beloved community of the CVUU, vision a future where our reason and our spirituality fuel us into action that creates greater justice and compassion in the world. And we recognize that together is the only way to make it happen. We know we can always return to this place, to each other, when the path is uncertain. We know this is a place we can anchor ourselves to, returning to the assurance of spiritual connection, friendship, and shared history. We know that our common hopes and the relationships that are formed among members here are the foundations that give us the stability to stand together united. Everything is going to be okay as long as we're together. Amen, and blessed be.